So hello, Perennial Pride listeners. Thanks for joining me on this episode. I have a awesome guest today, Kevin Micinilio from Schaff Darby Companies, Inc. He's a commercial insurance expert. He's a guy that I go to all the time asking questions, and he's helped me out with a lot of my clients. Someone I totally respect, trust. He's a friend of mine, and I had to have him come on here and share his wisdom with you. For those who are in real estate and real estate investors, business owners, or thinking about starting your business, he's a tremendous resource, and I wanted to bring him on here to share some of his wisdom with you. So, Kevin, thanks for joining us today.
Well, good morning, Tom. Thank you for having me. It's an honor and pleasure to be a part of this. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I know.
And you should let your base let them know that I'm also a client of yours as well. So.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. I appreciate that. And it's always good to work with people you can trust and respect, and really love working with you and your family.
Thank you. And likewise.
So listen, Kevin, before we get started on some of the insurance related topics, I know we share a lot in common around importance of family and business and life. And so tell the audience, how did you even get into commercial insurance to begin with?
As with most things in life, Tom, it's a great question. It's an interesting one. And, today the term my former life gets used quite a bit by a lot of us. And my former life, I was a personal trainer. I had actually have my BS in exercise science. I worked in that field for close to 10 years. But as my life was progressing, marriage, home ownership, child on the way. It was a very challenging life to balance those personal things with that, because I was at the beckoning call of other people, at quote unquote non-traditional hours. Not that I'm not in insurance, but from a standpoint, from a lifestyle standpoint, it was becoming very challenging. So I had made a paradigm shift, a quantum leap, or sort of say, in my career, and one of my best clients is the CEO of our agency, and I approached him. I think he almost fell off his chair when I asked him about the property and casualty world and what it would take for someone who really doesn't know much about it to start in it. And he and the folks at the time who made the decisions said, we can take you under our wing, and we'll learn you the business, and you're going to have to work at getting clients. So that's how I landed here. That was 21 years ago.
Wow.
It was in the winter of the first quarter of 2000, and the world changed drastically very shortly thereafter, and certainly the insurance world changed then. But yeah, that's how I ended up here. So
no, it's great.
Never looked back. I never regretted it. So.
Yeah, you've been in it for a while, and obviously you've built up a lot of expertise and experiences with it. So that's why it's so valuable to have you on here. And no, I don't think anyone would say they grew up to be an insurance person or an agent, broker, me included.
That is a running joke in our industry.
Yeah, but we obviously know the importance and value it provides. Obviously, in the financial world, that everyone maybe not fully understand it or appreciate it. Certainly, being on the wealth side, I kind of see both angles of it, from protection and building wealth. But you're protecting, in a lot of cases, their people's number one asset, their business they're growing, which is massive. And so we're going to talk a little more about that. But I love, by the way, I want to share with people your tagline, which I love. Exposure for your business is great. Leaving it exposed is not. So. As a fun note, how did that come about again? You created that?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. I was traveling on a very regular basis, 2 to 3 times a week, on a certain stretch of I-95, and there was a billboard there, and it had something to do with that along the lines. There was a character there, and almost like an animated character there, and I kept saying, I'm like, how can I make that my tagline or modify it? And I, driving up and down I-95 and stuck in traffic, I came up with the idea. It was something completely different. I don't even remember what the product or service was. I want to recall it was like for replacement windows or something, but it just said don't be exposed. And I said, well, exposure is a big insurance term. I've got to incorporate this. So that's how I kind of came up with it. So
That's
I'm
really cool.
glad you like it, and I'm glad it stuck. So thank you.
What this is what I appreciate about you. Yeah, you work insurance, analytical, super diligent in what you do, but you certainly have a creative arm to you that shows up. I've seen it a number of times. So hopefully your clients appreciate that side of you too.
Thank you. I can't draw stick figures though. So.
So let's get into because some of the listeners on here are in real estate, and real estate investing is obviously a big area of my life personally, and what I help people think about and do. So tell us a little bit about sort of some of the things with some of your clients that you're helping them realize around protecting their real estate. It's a business, really, right? If you have investments in large, small,
Absolutely.
whatever. So can you talk more about that, kind of your kind of experience with it, maybe things that people really need to consider deeply as it relates to their real estate investing?
Yes, the number one thing, and just economically where we are in our world, and the term that gets thrown around multiple times a day, every day, supply chain issues. Well, if you have an investment property, no matter what it may be, if it's an apartment building or it's an industrial processing, warehouse or something, if something happens, if there's a loss, let's just say a fire, and then you have to go and replace that structure or a portion of that structure, you are then at the mercy of the supply chains. You're at the mercy of construction, and you're at the mercy of hauling and transportation. Diesel fuels are probably at their absolute historic highs right now, and most of that, what's going to take away what's burned and what's going to bring in the new material is probably arriving by diesel. So, not to bog down in details about that, but as a property owner, something that really, really needs to be considered is, hey, what would it cost for you to replace this building today? And not only what it would cost for you to replace it, what would it cost for you to tear it down and haul it away? So, a lot of these commercial policies created differently with different endorsements to add coverage, but at the bottom line, it all boils down to insurance to value, what we, acronym ITV. And this is a time for property owners, if it is an investment and it is a business, that you protect that. And this is the time to really, really scrutinize that and look at that, especially if the building has some type of unique materials. If it has solar on the roof or solar, sometimes there's a solar field next to a large commercial property. Any of those things, hey, what is it going to cost for me to replace this stuff? How am I going to get my hands on it? Talk to contractors, talk to builders, talk to developers. Those are great people to have relationships with if you're a property, / building owner. Really get a handle on where things happen, because when a claim happens, you're a business owner or a property owner, their world gets turned upside down. Yes, the insurance is there to help them, but everything scrambles. And then there's, in addition to it, there's loss of rental income. Those figures should be analyzed. I know some folks in my town, who own investment properties, and they're able to charge 3 times the rent they were 18 months ago, because that's what the market is bearing. Well, your insurance policy has to follow suit if there's a loss and your tenants have to vacate that property, which the majority of the time that is the case. So there's a lot of factors involved, but really those two things. Hey, what would it cost to build this thing in today's dollars, and how much am I insured for? If my tenant stops paying me rent, or stops obligating their financial portion to the lease. So there's different ways to layer that, but kind of boiling it down, I think those two, in that specific field, in that specific world of insurance. Those are really the two main factors that I would, that I like to do with my clients to hey, focus on this,
Yeah, and to your point, like with there's a lot of, obviously we're doing this time recording, it's high inflation, so, and to your point, supply chain issues, even labor costs are sky
Yeah.
high if you can actually ever find any. So
Right.
that's why it's so important to kind of take a review of that every year to make sure you're keeping up with it, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Correct. Yeah.
and certainly the other side too, and Kevin talk maybe even with our own world, like I look at it, because things will change. We can't predict when any of these things will happen, but I know things will change, and I do try to plan for the worst because I'd rather be prepared than, to your point, exposed. So how about the side of like, liability? Because I'm worried like people are just like like if someone does something in my property and I fall down and get hurt, like if they get hurt, like and suing you, like to talk about that and what people should be thinking about around that.
That's wonderful. I actually just finished up a call prior to our meeting here with a client who has multiple properties in different uh, in different towns here locally, and he said, "Well, how much am I covered for from a liability standpoint?" And I said, "Well, you're only covered for $1 million at each location." And he said, "Well, what do you suggest?" I said, "At least a minimum of a $2 million umbrella." I said, "The value of your properties in the areas that they're located in, I would suggest at least 5 million.
Mm.
I would strongly consider 5 million. Excuse me, is what I advised. So that's something I'll be working on this afternoon. Yeah, that's people say, well, I can get a liability policy that has a $500,000, and I say you should never any form of business insurance, any form of property ownership as an investment. You shouldn't have no less than $1 million of liability. I like to say when you purchase a policy, that the liability, is basically like buying a car and it comes with four wheels. But what kind of tires do you want your family, driving on in the middle of a snowstorm or a very severe rainstorm? So, some companies will, I've seen as low as $100,000 on an investment property for liability, which is just, that's, hello, you have a lawsuit, that $100,000 just walked out the door. So, and then you can layer things, like I said, with umbrellas. That's very, and it's very inexpensive too. And some people think, well, I have $500,000, it costs X. If I go to 1 million, that X is going to double, and it's not necessarily the case. Rating for liability in those scenarios typically is not on a linear relation, a linear path like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's amazing how inexpensive it is to go from 500 to 1 million. And in some cases, in a $1 million or $2 million umbrella is very inexpensive as well. So, one thing I do even for new business owners and property owners, and even if it's a small property, a small investment property, I always include an umbrella, and I'll explain to them the benefits of that, and that they should just incorporate it into their insurance expenses, for that business. So.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just it's not something that I always say, when you have a claim, that's not a great time to ask, hey, how much is my coverage and how much did I pay for it? I've never had anybody call me with a claim, and not say how much limit do I have? Sorry, I'm sorry, I digress a little bit, but when a claim happens, especially a liability claim, it's just you want that insulation there. You want that protection. So
Yeah.
it's something I review with all my clients.
And that's it. I mean, I think most people want it, and obviously, in both of our worlds, it's always, the first focus becomes, what does it cost me?
Absolutely, I understand that. I mean, that is, it's a part of a business. It has to factor in. It's a cost, and I deal with that. I provide spreadsheets for certain clients and everything. I understand it's a cost, and I understand it's expensive. It's, a top 5 expense for almost any business, for any property owner, for any landlord, any investment property. But at the same time, you look to get creative with certain things. Sometimes people can absorb a higher deductible. Some umbrellas have retentions, and you can adjust with that. That might offset some of that. And someone would say, "Hey, I'd rather take, the first $10,000 of it than the first $1 million of it on my own." So, you be creative like that, and I work to explain that with clients as well. But certainly, I am very, very well aware that insurance costs are a major factor in owning property.
Yeah, it's always a battle, right? Because what I try to at least share with some of my clients too, and talk to them when I'm talking about the commercial side is, do you want if one of these bad things does happen, could it essentially put you out of business in a sense, right?
Yeah,
the size of it catastrophically.
Yeah. And there's legal things that people do. Obviously, LLCs are very, very popular, and most people do that. They'll have some type of corporate protection, which is great. That's a legal matter. That's not my area of expertise, and that provides quite a bit of protection. But at the same time, there's the assets within that corporation that will be at risk. You still have to look at it from that. You're not 100% insulated just because there's a corporate veil in place.
Right. You definitely need the proper insurances for sure.
Your area of expertise is accumulating and building wealth. My area is to protect that. So, and you offer certain protections as well from a property and an investment, a real estate investment point. That's where I am. So.
It's these simple phrases that maybe until you think about them they don't really sink in, but it's not what you make, it's what you get to keep. And depending on your level of protection, reserves, and planning, unfortunately, I'm sure you've seen cases where a lot of people's assets can vanish quickly with not enough protection in place.
Unfortunately, yes.
Reserves and in preparation for it.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. I heard an awful story where someone didn't protect their inventory or whatever. Like, we'll go into that next. So let me shift gears a little bit from the real estate side, and obviously a lot of these things will apply too. But I do talk to folks who are maybe thinking about getting into a business venture. They see the benefit of maybe starting a side business, or maybe have aspirations to leave their jobs to start a business. So as you're getting into the beginning stages of it, what are some things you can share with the listeners that they need to be thinking deeply about or considering as they're kind of starting their businesses? I know that's a broad question because it could be any type of business, but what are some things that they should be thinking about as they're kind of starting their business ventures?
Yeah, very, very great question, Tom. And, obviously general liability is going to be the first and foremost. Even businesses who, like I said, might be home-based, wherever they're placing their thoughts or ideas, or if they're, in some type of recruitment, the end user is going to most likely require general liability. That's fairly straightforward. Also, there could be a small amount of property on what we refer to as a business owner policy, otherwise called a BOP. That would be the first and foremost thing. Then there is, do you have any employees? Do you have any 1099s? Do you have any subcontractors? Do you have any independent contractors? Especially here in Connecticut, statutorily, there's the need for workers' comp. And many times that could be very, very inexpensive. Broadening from there, I see most people who, and I deal quite a bit with this. I deal a lot with new businesses, emerging businesses, or spin-offs from existing businesses. The real need is it's either a thought or an idea that they're bringing out to the marketplace. Obviously, if you're in an artisan contractor such as an electrician, plumbing, HVAC, tiling, go on and on. You're doing something. You're providing you're constructing something or you're renovating something. That's a whole different set. But I'm talking about someone who might be a consultant. They might be a recruiter. They might provide some type of professional services. There's where attorneys retire from maybe a large law firm, and then they go out on their own and might have a specialty, such as, let's say, trusts and estates. Those types of things. Accountants who retire from their career and start a bookkeeping business. All those scenarios, errors and omissions, or what's commonly referred to as professional liability, really is where I see that need coming in quite a bit. And many times, someone's excited, they have ideas, and they're really trying to put all their energy into growing a business and growing their brand, that they don't think about that. And again, they might be being dictated, well, I'm signing a contract and all they're requiring is workers' comp. Can you get me workers' comp? Yes, I can, but what is it that you're providing? How are you being compensated by your client? What does your contract say? And errors and omissions, I'll just refer to it as E&O going forward. E&O protects against, hey, I wrote your will incorrectly, and your heirs are going to sue me, or your books were done incorrectly. Now the IRS is knocking on your door. I caused you, your family, or your business a financial hardship that did not exist before you started doing business with me. So that's where errors and omissions comes into play. And many times, I keep saying this, but it could be very inexpensive. There's some great markets out there. My reach into the marketplace is fairly comprehensive. And we work with some great underwriters, some great carriers that specialize in some that's all they do. So any type of business, there's usually an errors and omissions product available for them. So that's something I definitely bring to their attention. Then the other is, I really can't think of any business that does not have a data breach exposure. And the reason being is you sign a contract with someone and has their business information on it. You have you basically have a data breach exposure. You might say, well, it's minimum or next to none. But then next thing, there's banking information being exchanged, possibly credit card information being changed, personal information being changed, addresses, names, whatever it may be. There is an exposure there. And everybody says, well, that client's taking that on. I don't know. When you're sitting in court, do you want to rely on that other policy? So that really, really is a big one. Someone says, well, I don't do online commerce. I don't take credit card payments. I don't know any business that does not, in today's day and age, collect some form of information. And even if it's just exchanging emails and ideas back and forth, there's just a lot there. And people are not aware of it. And it's not, hey, I don't even have a website. It has nothing to do with that. There's any information that you have or previously had or retain from a client, no matter what scenario it may be, in the private sector or in a retail sector, you basically have an exposure. So those are the two, like I said, initially general liability and workers' comp. Those are kind of nuts and bolts. That's how you get started. There might always not be a need for workers' comp, but then from there, expanding from there, really E&O and data breach, data privacy are the two that I really try and delve into what someone's going to be doing, where they see their business going, what are what is their vision for their business and growth. A lot of new businesses I speak with, like, hey, I grew so fast, I don't have time, I don't have any employees right now. I'm trying to find someone, and they're just juggling a whole lot of things. And the last thing they're going to think about is insurance, because they took care of that when their business started. So, from the onset, I like to, have an idea, where is your plan for this? What are your, like anything in life, what are your 3, 5, 10-year goals for this business? Yeah. And say, hey, you might not need this today, but it's something I want you to think about, or something we should, discuss again in the future. So, so those two are really sometimes in someone's opening a business or starting a new venture, it's not something they think of. So
Yeah, no, it's and a lot of these things, even just on a personal level, like you worry about things like like you mentioned, like data breaches, cybersecurity. You kind of know these things are out there, but it's just hard to get your head around it. And that's why I need experts like you to help people see the
yeah,
importance of it
and,
because they could be very damaging.
and if a business is taking any type of financial transaction, people say, "Oh, I'm protected by whatever company it may be," and not to be a smart aleck, but I often ask, "Have you read a PCI agreement? Payment processing agreement?" They're multiple pages long, and there's nothing in there that says we're going to protect you. Um, it's quite the opposite. So it's and again, it's sometimes people just want to glaze over things, and those are painful losses. They are a business owner's world gets turned upside down when those losses happen. So
Yeah.
you know
Well, I read this thing the other day, and it really struck me too. Around, we're coming on some uncertain times in our economy at the time of this recording, and it was a billionaire, a business owner, and one of the keys that he was talking about to his success is that he knows things could change on a dime. All the success you have, things could quickly turn if you're not prepared. And that's why these sorts of things around spending the time to take, inventory of your commercial protections of your business and certainly in personal lines. We're not going to talk through that, but so key because we don't know when those things turn. We don't get sometimes a
right.
forewarning of them.
Yeah, and it could be something out of your control. It might not necessarily be economic times or anything like that. But I remember there was a uh, very prominent insurance company that was running commercials. Primarily, I would see them if I was watching a golf tournament. They were in other areas as well, but I always remember it from there. And it was an ice cream shop owner who had their insurance. The business had their insurance with this very recognizable carrier. And he goes through the whole process, and this business owner explains, I could have never predicted this, but it was nice to know that they were there for me, and that the agent was involved and instructed me on this, because it was in a kind of a resort area, and that's you have very very lucrative times, and then you have very very slow times, if you're in one of those areas, and that was the exact message that the business owner was involved in the commercial with, was that nothing is certain, and this is nothing I could have ever predicted, and it was nothing I could have ever comprehended until I had to live it.
Yeah,
So,
unfortunately, we and this is where doing some planning ahead of time hopefully will ease the burden and pain when those things hit us, and allow people to hopefully stay in business and continue to move forward in their lives, right?
yeah, I mean,
With the minor damage.
that is exactly correct. You want to be restored. You want to be indemnified to where you were prior to the loss, and ideally continue your business. Are there scenarios where people decide not to? Absolutely, but that's a personal decision, and that's a life decision. But yeah, that really is the basis of it.
So, are there any, through some of the world and information you were able to access, like any emerging risks that you're kind of watching that I know the data breach and cybersecurity type stuff is very key. Anything else that's kind of popping up is something that you're paying attention to?
There always are. There's something that is emerging, and the carriers are. It's very difficult to wrap their brains around it, from an actuarial standpoint. But protecting accounts receivable for business, it's been around for a while. It's not widely used. But that could be devastating to a business where certain policies, like a business owner's policy that I mentioned earlier, Tom, Bob, they'll have accounts receivable coverage in there, and it'll be a set limit. It's not something you can determine, but there are these other coverages out there. I would say that that's something that's emerging. Again, it's been around. It just hasn't fully emerged. I see that, but again, cyber really it's ever evolving. It's been here for quite some time now, and as the criminals in that world get more and more creative, coverage has to be able to respond to it. And I can tell you, we write with a number of dozens of carriers in that world, and their products are ever evolving. Some for the better, others are taking away coverage because they said, well, we never studied it this way, and we suffered quite a bit of losses that we never intended to pay because we weren't aware of it. So that's in and of itself is its own emerging world. So I really try to keep an eye on that, because just, that world we all live on, that you and I are on right now, the digital world, there's just a whole lot that goes on there.
And for, the vast majority, I think it's, they know a little bit, but there's, to your point, a lot out there. And not to be fearful of it, but, certainly it's worth exploring it and ensuring that you have enough coverage and knowledge to make some good decisions around it. And some of the other things I know you don't cover it, maybe a little bit, but in my world around business owners too is we've talked a little bit about, we're not going to go into depth here, but key people on your companies, or if you have partnerships, like people die, right, or get disabled, and all these sorts of things that could impact business. Also can be a huge benefit to look into those things, because even partnerships where you're dealing with one partner and they pass away, now you're partners with their spouse potentially. And have you thought about those sorts of things that could eventually happen? So we'll probably do another episode related to that specifically, but that's something that I know we've talked about, and it's part and parcel of like looking at the business holistically.
Yeah, I'll just, if you don't mind if I run with that for just a minute here, Tom, is most in respects to workers' compensation, most corporate officers, most members of an LLC or whatever the corporate structure may be of an entity, those folks tend to exclude themselves. I don't want to get into the minutia of rating and things like that, but and there's good reason for it. Okay, but my question is, when they're signing an exclusion form, or we confirm that they can wish to continue to be excluded, is have you updated your disability policy? And to defer back to those professionals who handle that, because I understand you want to save on premium, especially like I was just dealing with a client this past week who operates heavy machinery. From a workers' comp standpoint, he excludes himself because it's a very, very highly rated class code. But he needs other protections in place. Group disability, if he can get it, or an individual disability policy, if he qualifies for that, which I defer back to you. But that really is a good question, because sometimes it's, yep, I'm excluded. I don't have to, I'm not going to pay premium on myself. I'm not going to be picked up on an audit. Totally understandable. The vast majority of my clients who are officers or members, they do that. But there's a downside to it, or potentially a severe downside to it. Hey,
Yeah.
if there's three partners in a business and they're all integral to different parts of that business, and one of them is disabled, how does that business survive?
Exactly. I mean, how it works for some that certainly they're solopreneurs or 2.2 people partnerships. I mean, there's not a lot of people that just fill right in, and these things are, and we think about with our even personal lives, right? Fill in for our family, same for the business. It can running on fewer resources inside, so certainly things to consider. So anything else, Kevin? This has been great. A lot of great information here. Anything that we didn't talk about you'd like to share with the listeners here? Anything else? Other topics that you think are people should know about as they're thinking about their commercial insurance needs?
I would just say, review it and review it often. Grab your agent, schedule quarterly or semi-annual meetings, whether doing something like you and I are doing here virtually, or just even a phone call. The world is just changing so fast, and there might be something that a business owner may even consider, but it is integral to their business. Something that I do. There is a fair amount of manufacturing in this area, and I do have some excellent clients who make very, very specialized items, shall we just say. And they're all dependent upon someone supplying them. Whether it be chemicals, maybe it be raw materials, maybe it be a component part. And are you protected on your business policy if you're in that industry, if you're in the manufacturing world? Are you protected if someone else's factory goes down? Those are very important things to think about. And in today's world, it's just absolutely magnified, that you could just absolutely, a business could be grind to a halt if something integral to what they do or make is no longer available. And there are ways to protect against that. So through a business insurance policy. So the end of the day, review. I can part on that part.
No,
I
great
can part on
advice.
that note. Excuse me. So
Yeah, no, it's huge, and it's getting into a habit of taking a look with your expert, with someone like yourself, and it's so key just to stay top of mind on it and ensure everything's up to date, and you got you're keeping a pulse of the industry, and that's helpful. So it's really appreciated. So awesome, Kevin. Thank you so much for this. It was great.
thank you, Tom. It was
Have
an
you back
honor and
on
a
for
pleasure.
another
Thank you.
episode of this. And the last thing I do want to share that's kind of a little bit off topic, and I always love to hear people's thoughts around this. We talk about, obviously, this whole podcast is centered around protecting and building wealth and legacy and such. But we know money isn't everything in this world, and we could be wealthy I hope everyone gets wealth in all areas of their lives. So for you, Kevin, outside of, say, your financial life, share with me and the listeners just any other areas of your life you feel pretty wealthy about and have a lot of abundance and joy with.
Well, first and foremost, it's certainly family. I'm very blessed there, in all aspects of family. And above and beyond that, I would just say, the rest of it's gravy. So my gravy would include organic gardening. I very much enjoy that, and when I'm lucky enough, I can consume what I grow. Especially just vegetables and things like that. I really enjoy that. And then I'm an avid saltwater fisherman, very avid. And I'm very fortunate. My son is probably more avid than I am at it. So we get to enjoy that together. And it's just a lot of fun. And it's a way to, sometimes turn your brain off from the pressures of life. But, we're very fortunate the area that you and I are located in. It's from that. For me being able to pursue that, I'm very, very fortunate to be around here, and it's been fun. It's been, probably shortly after I was walking quite a bit, my father had introduced me to it, and it never left. So
That's great.
yeah. So
And it's just just like anything
I
else.
don't have any marlin or tuna hanging behind me on my wall, but
You can get one of
that's
those.
not my that's not my gig, But
Yeah.
no, I thoroughly enjoy that, and just being on the water for whatever many reasons we all are attracted to that. It just has just such a beneficial, to all, our well-being, just all around. I really, really enjoy it. So thank you for asking that.
Yeah, no, it's great. Listen, it's all part of when we're better in other areas of our lives, we show up better in our work and our relationships. So it's all connected for sure.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. On occasion, I'll donate golf balls to a golf course, all over, but I try and limit myself with that. So
yeah, damaging dirt. Yeah, but wonderful. And one last thing is just best way to reach you probably through email, right through your company. We'll put a kind of link to you.
Yeah.
Right. Best place to reach you.
Absolutely. I'm very much in tune to my email at all times. So that is number one, but thank you.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, appreciate you. Thanks for joining me today. Got a lot out of this and continue a great partnership working together. Really appreciate all your expertise and we'll have you back on another date.
Thank you. And thank you for all your expertise that you share with my clients, Tom. And again, I will attest, I am a client of yours, and you've done magnificent work for my family and I. So thank you, and thank you for having me as your guest. This was tremendous. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining me on this episode today. I really am grateful for you as listeners to the Perennial Pride podcast. I hope you're getting some tremendous value out of it and hopefully pushing you along your journey to financial freedom. I put this podcast together really to help you get more educated around your finances so that you feel empowered to live the life that you really want. And if you like the content that you heard today or watched, then I would encourage you to go to my website, perennialpride.com. There's tons of other content there. And you can access my book, Wealth Beyond the Numbers. You can buy it there on my website. It's a aggregation of a lot of great tips and tools I've learned to not only build my wealth in my accounts, but build wealth in my life and abundance and joy, and something that has a lot of my experiences in the journey that I've been on personally. Hopefully that can be also of value to you as you sort of move forward. So thanks again for being a Perennial Pride listener, and we'll see you on the next episode.